Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Prince George's County Memorial Library Systems virtual programs. My name is Nick. I work with the library. I'm very honored to be here with you today. And this is our inaugural episode of PGCMLS Career Chat. This is an opportunity for folks in the community to hear from leading professionals who have had really amazing journeys in their educational paths and also in their careers. And it's a chance for all of you to learn about different paths and really the way that you can create your own journey and experience in life to reach your goals, whatever they might be and whatever the industry might be. So our special guest today is Melissa Hoppmeyer. She is the chief of the Family Violence and Special Victims Unit at the Prince George's County State's Attorney's Office. And Melissa is an assistant state's attorney as a result of that role, which is really cool. And she has had a really distinguished career in both law practice on the private side and then also in public service roles in the state's attorney's office here in Prince George's County, and also worked for a time as the assistant attorney general for the state of Maryland for organized crime, and studied at George Washington University, received a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and also a JD for the law degree. And we're so grateful to have you here with us today, Melissa. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Totally. For those of you who are really savvy with our virtual programs, you might have noticed that Melissa did a read aloud last week with her kids, which was really awesome. And we're grateful for her returning today. And we appreciate everything that State's Attorney Brave Boy has done to ensure that her team is working with us, and it's been a great partnership, and we appreciate everyone in the state's attorney's office for supporting the library's efforts to keep you all connected as Prince Georgians during this time.
Yeah.
So this is going to be fun. This is going to be low key. We're just going to chat about career and life and journey and stuff. And if you have any questions while you're watching, please type them into the chat box here in Crowdcast. And if you're watching on another platform, I will be able to catch those comments as we go and share them with Melissa. So Melissa, I'll start off with kind of a fun question. I saw that you speak Portuguese.
I do.
And I would love to hear how that came to be.
So I was born in Brazil. My
Cool.
dad is Brazilian. And so my parents moved down there after they met and got married. And so I was born there and I lived there until I was about 3.5.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
Cool. What part of Brazil is your
São
family?
Paulo.
Cool.
São Paulo, yeah.
Awesome. I speak Spanish, and sadly not Portuguese, though. I'd love to learn someday. I visited Portugal and had a blast. It would be
Yeah.
somewhere that I would love to just go disappear to for a while.
Yeah.
Haven't been to Brazil yet, though.
It's
That's
a
on my
beautiful
list.
country.
Yeah. You go back and visit much?
Yeah, we were just there in December visiting family. So my dad still has family down there. So we went down there so that my family could meet my youngest, who's will be 3.
Very cool. So when you came up here, where did you grow up for the most
I grew
part?
up in Florida. So I grew up in South Florida. And then I came up to this area for college and then law school.
And then just stayed on afterwards?
Stayed on, yeah.
Cool. When you were in high school and in college, what kinds of things were you interested in terms of extracurriculars or clubs, or did you do sports?
Yeah, I did a little bit of everything. So when I was in high school, I was in the student body. I was student body vice president, and I was a part of the honor society. But I also volunteered outside of the office. I worked for the ACLU as an intern for almost a year, and I helped. I participated in some drives to assist with people getting their voters' rights back. I also helped develop a mentor reading program for kids, for high school students and elementary school kids in Florida, where I grew up.
Very cool. And what made you decide on political science for undergrad?
So I've always been fascinated by politics. It's why I wanted to come up here and go to GW for law school. And so, for a really long time, I thought that one day that I would run for public office. And so I just, always was fascinated by politics.
Very cool. Where did you live when you were doing the whole GW thing?
So I lived on campus, I think all 4 years, because I was the president of my sorority my last year. And so I lived in the sorority house. And then when I was in law school, I lived for a little bit in Chinatown, actually for all 3 years in Chinatown.
Very cool. Awesome. And what kind of prompted the switch from your undergrad major to pursuing the law?
So I always wanted to be a lawyer. I have a framed picture that I drew when I was in the first grade,
Wow,
me being a prosecutor,
cool.
and it sits in my office now. So I always wanted to be a lawyer. So I knew, I wanted to study political science, but ultimately my goal was always to go to law school. And so I was lucky enough after undergrad, take the LSAT and was able to go to GW.
Cool. Um, I I feel like I don't hear that many lawyers who start off that early with the drive to be in the legal profession. So I think it's
I
really
don't
cool.
think so.
Yeah. What attracted you to being a prosecutor?
I don't know about that young, but I do remember when I was growing up, we had teen court, which they also have here in Prince George's County, and I participated in that in high school as well as we did civics, and I just always was fascinated by the kind of the role that the prosecutor has in the entire criminal justice process. And I know a lot of people think the defense attorney is this really important player, and they are, and the judge is very important too. But it really, when you think about it, the prosecutor has just the most power in the courtroom because they make the decision on whether or not to charge somebody with a crime. So I always was fascinated with you know that, and making sure that it was done in a fair manner. So it just kind of led me that way.
Very cool. And what was the experience like in law school with kind of the courses that you took and how that led to your track that you've been on now?
So, law school is hard.
Yeah.
And you have to take a little bit of everything. You can't, even if you come in saying, I want to be a prosecutor or I want to be, a contracts attorney, you have to take all different types of classes in order to get through law school. And so some of those classes are difficult because, like tax is not something that I enjoy. Contract law is not something that really is fun. I know people do. And so those classes were difficult for me because they weren't things that I was really interested in. And I always found when I was going through school that I did better in classes where I was really interested in the class. It just helped me to, kind of concentrate more.
Hmm. I'm thinking back in law school, like, were there any particular moments where you kind of had an aha moment of whether I don't know if you were involved in like clinics with supporting community members who needed legal help or things like that, but I'm curious to hear if there were any really special moments that kind of affirmed your whole commitment to this field.
Yeah, so I was in the domestic violence clinic at GW with Professor Meyer, who still runs the clinic to this day. And part of the, you got to do kind of external things. And so my external thing was volunteering at the Prince George's County State's Attorney's Office in the domestic violence unit as a rule. Then it was a Rule 16. It's now a Rule 19, where I got to be a student prosecutor. And when I started getting to prosecute these cases, even as a student, it just kind of affirmed that I loved it. Those were the days I look forward to the most, were the days I got to come to Prince George's County to go to the courthouse to prosecute and to work with the victims of domestic violence.
Hmm. Cool. What is the journey for someone who's leaving law school and finishing and doing the bar and that kind of thing? Like, what's the journey from that point to where you are now in your career in terms of how people might, if you're aspiring to be in the state's attorney's office or in a public legal role like that, how do you get there from just finishing law school?
Yeah, so I think interning is a huge thing because you get to know kind of the people who work there. And what you'll learn about prosecutors' offices is not everybody, but a lot of people tend to be career prosecutors. It's just the people who go to state prosecutors' offices, they go for two reasons. One is to get experience trying cases because we do that. And the other thing is because they love the job and they want to do it forever. And so I think interning is important. But right after law school, I had the opportunity to clerk for a judge in Prince George's County, Judge Northrup, who's now retired. And that helped me learn the courthouse a little bit better. I got to meet people that I hadn't met during my internship, and it just kind of helped open the door for me that when there was an opening in the state's attorney's office, and it happened to be in domestic violence, which is the type of work that I always wanted to do, it was kind of, I don't want to say a shoe-in, but it was an easy kind of transition for me because I knew everybody, they knew me,
Mhm.
they knew that I was passionate about the work, and so it was a great opportunity.
Cool. And what are legal internships typically paid, or is it volunteer while you're in school? How does that all work?
Yeah, unfortunately, at least in the state attorney's office, we work with a limited budget, so it's not paid. They're unpaid internships. I know some schools, like I know GW does have, if you do public service, they'll give you like a stipend for the summer in order to do it. And I know other schools, I think Catholic University and maybe University of Baltimore also have similar programs.
Hmm.
And so because you're kind of volunteering, they know that that's an expense and it can be difficult. They'll help provide kind of a stipend for the summer, but they're unpaid otherwise.
Yeah, cool. Um, with what you just shared, and something that applies to any kind of career, I think that relationships are always central. So can you talk a bit more about when you were in internship, like how you approach cultivating longer term relationships with the folks that you work with?
Yeah, I think it's really important. One, because I think you can learn from so much from the people that you work with, whether they have a lot more time under their belt than you do, or a little bit more time than you do. So when I started, Ann Wagner Stewart, who's now a judge in the district court, was the chief of the special victims unit, and I just kind of asked her questions. Probably thought it was very annoying at first,
Mhm.
but I just asked questions. I went and I watched people in court and then asked questions about why they did things the way that they did. Or I always volunteered to do extra work because I wanted to learn and I wanted to learn from them because, they were just, to me, very impressive. They still are. And so I think that that's really important, is just kind of figuring out people who are like-minded like you, who you kind of want to learn from, and then, kind of just taking the initiative to ask questions to see if you can help. Even if it's just with making copies or looking something up, even if it's a small part of it, you have to be part of a bigger thing. I think people remember that, and I think it's helpful to move forward in your career, whether it's as a lawyer or really in any career. I think people are always looking for people who are motivated to do extra and to help out.
Hmm. Cool. Yeah, from our end on the library side, like that uh, passion for playing a role in something that's bigger than us is really the common thread with anything public
Yeah.
service. Or if we think about our friends in public safety or the healthcare field, or really at this moment, like anyone who's doing anything that is serving. So like from grocery store workers to the delivery folks from Amazon or the postal service, everyone really has an important role in our overall well-being. And I think at moments like these right now, we really see how um, everyone's role is equal in terms of um, supporting each other, because that's ultimately what we're here to do. So
Yeah,
cool.
for sure.
Thinking along the lines of the relationships, but going back to when you were in high school or in college, who were the people who supported you along the way? Was it a guidance counselor or specific teachers or coaches or family members?
So I have definitely some teachers in high school that I leaned on a lot. One of my actual really good friends in high school, her mom was a social studies teacher, and she was just somebody. Even when I went to college, when I was having issues writing papers or just adjusting to college life, I would email her because we didn't really text back then, or call her and kind of get advice from her. And so I relied on her a lot. And then as I kind of moved through undergrad and then into law school, I had some really good law professors. Professor Meyer was one of them, who was the clinic professor. And then I had some professors in legal advocacy that I kind of relied on to kind of give me advice throughout, and just to kind of help guide me. And then as I've become a lawyer, you go against defense attorneys and then you work with prosecutors, and I've been really fortunate to have people on both sides who have given me good career advice, who I can go to. I have some judges, including my judge who's now retired, who I can go to talk to. And I think it's just so important to kind of get perspectives from all different kinds of people, not to just rely on one person to kind of give you advice, because everyone has different life experiences. And so whenever I have to make a big choice, or whenever, I have questions, I kind of ask my like two or three go-to people, because I know they're kind of different and they've had different experiences. And when they all say the same thing, I know that that's the right answer.
Cool. Very good. How have you approached moments with those trusted people or others um, where you might feel something contradictory to what they're suggesting, like maybe your gut is just telling you what they're telling you is just not going to be right for that moment. Like, how do you process that, and how do you get to a point of feeling confident enough in making a decision that might go against the advice that you're getting?
Yeah, that's really hard. And I think ultimately you have to trust your gut. And I say it, and I think my husband has said it to me a few times. Like, ultimately, you have to live with the decision that you make. And so, if your gut is telling you something else, I think you need to go with it, because you don't want to look back on life and say, I should, I listened to people, I should have listened to myself. But that's hard when people are telling you the
Yeah.
opposite of what you're kind of feeling. Is not easy. It's hard. Yeah.
Hmm. How does that happen in like a work situation, like in your current role? Um, what gets to be a team decision versus an individual decision for you if you're like the lead on a case?
Yeah. So, ultimately, right now I'm the chief of the unit. So ultimately, the decisions kind of lay with me, and I trust the team that I work with and that work for me. But ultimately, when we're making a large decision, I don't want to say the state's attorney gets the
Yes.
ultimate decision. But I think you have to trust the team that you work with, and I think I have a really good team who really care about the citizens in Prince George's County, who care about the victims of our cases. And so, we do everything collaboratively. We have weekly meetings where we talk about our cases, about whether we have sufficient evidence to charge a case, what we think appropriate sentences are, because we have a really diverse group of attorneys that are working for us. We don't have just one person. Not everybody looks like me or looks like some of the other attorneys in the unit. We have a really diverse group who come from different backgrounds, and I think we try to use that to our advantage, to talk through cases and situations. And so, that's what we do. But ultimately, when I take a look at a case, if I think either way, if I think that there's enough evidence to charge, and I, believe our victims, then I'm going to push for us to charge. But the opposite, if I don't think there's sufficient evidence or it's borderline, then I'm going to, make that decision that, even if we think it happened, but we can't prove it, that we're not going to go forward.
Mhm. Gotcha. Um, can you tell us a bit more about what the state's attorney's office is and how it serves us as a community?
Yeah, so the state's attorney is the top law enforcement officer in Prince George's County, and what that means is that we prosecute criminal cases in Prince George's County. That's anything from disorderly conduct, DUIs, to homicide cases. And so, the office has over 100 attorneys that work for them, as
Wow.
well as support staff that we can't do our jobs without: paralegals, administrative aides. All different victim witness coordinators who help us with our victims and witnesses, investigators. Obviously, we have the administration, and the office is led by the state's attorney, Aisha Braveboy. And so, the office is broken down into several units. So typically, when you start out in the state's attorney's office as an attorney, as an assistant state's attorney, you'll start in district court. And those cases are the misdemeanor cases, anything from, like I said, DUI to second degree assault, malicious destruction of property, minor thefts are all handled by our district court attorneys. There are also specific dockets for domestic violence. So domestic violence is treated differently. We also have 4 domestic violence attorneys who handle the domestic violence misdemeanor cases, which are second degree assaults, violations of protective orders. And then we have, after that, we have grand jury, which reviews all felony cases and then will present felony cases to the grand jury for indictment. Our major crimes unit handles just general felonies. So any robberies, burglaries, some attempted murders are handled by our general. And then we have guns and drugs, which handles our guns and drugs cases. And then we have some specialty units, including our gang unit and a homicide unit. We have an economic crimes unit, and then a unit that does police investigations and investigations into other elected officials that may be involved in corruption or crime. And then we have my unit, which is the special victims unit that handles crimes against children and families. We do all domestic violence cases, as well as sexual assaults, child abuse, human trafficking, and child exploitation.
Mhm. That's a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um,
busy, unfortunately.
yeah. Oh, yeah. But we're glad to have you and your colleagues there to support everyone. Well, how does that structure compare to other states? Because I know, like, well, I grew up in Massachusetts and we have district attorneys there.
Right.
Is it basically the same thing? It's just with a different name?
Yeah, it's basically the same thing. So, we have colleagues that are called district attorneys, commonwealth attorneys, state attorneys. It just depends on your jurisdiction and what they call them. But yeah, they're the same things. Like you see on Law and Order, those DAs,
Hmm.
that's what we do.
Cool. Awesome. Um, Comparing where you are now to when you were in high school or in college, what skills did you gain in the experiences like student government or in your sorority that have stuck with you and you apply now in your work?
Yeah, I think just I have to be a good public speaker because I have to speak to juries and in front of groups of people, and so those are definitely skills that I learned in student government as the president of my sorority and representing the sorority on campus. I think one of the biggest lessons that I've learned throughout the different organizations that I volunteered with or that I've been a part of is just learning how to deal with people who may not have had the same experiences as you or who are different than you, and how to make sure that everybody is always feels as if they're treated with respect and are treated with respect. And so I think in the job that I have, because we see people at kind of sometimes the lowest points of their life. They've gone through something that is horrible, and it's sometimes really hard for them to talk about. It's hard for them to have you know, to talk about it to you, let alone to 12 strangers in a courtroom full of people. And so learning the skills of how to kind of talk to people and make them feel comfortable is just something that's been really useful for me.
Great. I just want to encourage everyone who's tuning in to feel free to share any questions you have or comments in the chat box on the right side of your screen. And if you're watching on a different platform, feel free to put in the questions and comments right into that platform, and I'll be checking everything regularly as we go. And until we get some of your audience questions, I'm going to keep going with mine, so you have time to think. One question I have for you to hear about your personal experiences. How have you approached um, developing your career and then also maintaining a work-life balance in that? And I know that's probably extremely difficult, especially with some of the roles you've had on the prosecutor side, um, that may be different from private practice. So I'm eager to hear how you have kind of approached that in your career.
Yeah, it is really hard. I think people don't realize as a prosecutor that it's kind of a 365-day job. It doesn't end because, crime doesn't stop. People don't stop doing things because it's 5 o'clock and you have to go home and pick up your kids. And so, I'm always answering my phone. I'm always texting and picking up and, talking to victims, talking to police officers, talking to the state's attorney. But I think I also, I don't really bring my work home in terms of sometimes I have to do work at home, but we don't really talk about my cases. I have young kids, and so I
Mhm.
have really heavy topics, and so we try not to talk about it. And then I always try to at least once a week have like one day, usually on Saturdays, where I just don't do any work unless there's an emergency. And I have an assistant chief, and so she, we kind of have the same philosophy. And so she'll take one day of the weekend to deal with emergencies, and I'll take the other day. And then if we have to call each other, we will. But those are just the days we get to turn it off. And so I'm lucky to have a good partner that I work with, and I couldn't do it without Catherine because I like if I need some time, I know that she can handle it, and that things are going to be handled appropriately. And I think she feels the same way.
Mhm. Great. Um, when you had kids, that is obviously a huge change and a really exciting change in your family life. How did you kind of prepare for that moment and that change for how you had to balance the time?
I didn't think it was going to change me. I was like, oh, I'm just going to get right back into it. And it changes everything. Having kids changes your entire perspective. It changes the hours that you're able to give because they have to be picked up and from daycare, and you have to work with your spouse or your partner to make sure that somebody's there to pick them up, and you want to spend time with them. So it's just given me, I try to spend a few hours every day just kind of completely turned off, unless there's an emergency. We have dinner together every night, and unless it's the state's attorney calling or I know it's an emergency, I don't pick up my phone. I'll call people back after if they call during dinner time. But it's a hard adjustment because I really care about the job that I do, and I want to do it well. But I also want to be a present mom and partner for my husband, and so it's hard. Yeah.
Yeah. What recommendations do you have for folks who might not be set on their career path, whether it's like the point of graduating high school or at the point of graduating college, or later on, maybe they're making a career transition. It sounds like you were really lucky to have a pretty clear trajectory, at least with what profession you wanted to be in. What do you think about folks who are exploring?
Yeah, I think I'm the outlier. I don't think most people know what they really want to do, and I encourage people to kind of volunteer and get involved and talk to family and friends who have different careers, and you see somebody doing something, you're like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what that kind of job would actually be like. And I would encourage you to talk to them and get them to tell you kind of what it really is like, because things look fun and great from a distance, and then when you talk to them, and like people who travel, I used to think, oh, I want to be that lawyer who gets to travel around the country, and then now that I have kids, I'm like, why would I want to be away from my kids for that long? So I encourage you to talk to people with different professions, volunteer, or if you're interested in law but you don't know what kind and you think you want to be in a courtroom, come to the courthouse. It's an open courthouse. Watch a criminal trial, watch a civil trial, watch a family law trial, see if it's something that sparks your interest, and go from there. But I think talking to people who are actually doing the job every day is probably the best advice I can give.
Mm-hmm. Cool. You've mentioned a bit about other types of roles in both the state's attorney's office and other folks that you interact with. If you were to think about that kind of wider orbit, can you explain a little bit more about the different types of jobs that might exist in the legal field for someone who maybe wants to try things out as an administrative assistant or as a paralegal to see if that's something that they want to commit to longer term?
Yeah, so like I said, our administrative assistants, our paralegals, our victim witness coordinators are people who perform such essential functions that we couldn't do our jobs, without them. Our admins, they help us prepare our motions. They help make sure that people are getting their subpoenas so that they know that they need to come to court. They help us send out discovery to defense counsel. Our paralegals help us with legal research. They redact our discovery, meaning they take out sensitive information that we can't provide, like social security numbers, phone numbers, if the victims don't want defense counsel to have them. And they help us prepare our indictments. Our paralegals help kind of keep track of every case that comes into the unit. And then our victim witness coordinators, they have kind of one-on-one communications with our victims, our witnesses. They help with resources if a victim needs restitution or wants help finding therapy. They help with all of that. And then they sit and they provide assistance in the courtroom if they want someone to sit with them while they're in court. And then they also sit with us while we're interviewing witnesses and prepping them for trial, and take notes so that if anything comes up that we need to provide to defense counsel, something they've said that they haven't said before, we have a witness there who can write it down and we can provide it.
Cool. And beyond the state's attorney's office, are there other agencies and folks who you interact with regularly, like social workers or the police officers and stuff?
Yeah, so we obviously work with police officers. We work with CPS, or at least my unit works with Child Protective Services. We work with social workers. We also work with the courts, so we work with judges and courtroom clerks as well as their administrative aides who help us. The public defender's office has a similar setup to us in terms of they have attorneys, paralegals. They have social workers that work for them. They have administrative aides. And so all of them work in the and they have paralegals. I don't know if I said that. And they do the same thing, except that they defend the people who are accused of the crime. And so they're set up almost similar. I think they have I don't think they have specialty units, but they have a misdemeanor and then a general felony rotation. And the social worker. So because we do child abuse and child sex abuse cases in my office, we work with social workers who help us do interviews of young children to learn about what happened to them, and then who testify about that, as well as, the effects that something like that would have on children in the future. And so we work with a lot of different agencies. We work with parole and probation, who keep track of people once they've either been convicted of a crime or plead guilty. If they're put on probation, they work with the offenders to fulfill any obligations the court has imposed, like restitution or anger management. And so we work with a lot of different agencies, police as well, that they investigate all of the crimes that we prosecute.
Cool. So you've been fortunate enough to have both public service work and then private practice work. Can you talk about the difference between those two paths and how you can kind of go back and forth from them?
Yeah, so I was in the state's attorney's office after I clerked for a few years, I think for 4 years almost. And then I decided I wanted to try something different. I wanted to try civil and private practice. And so because I had lots of trial experience, thanks to the state's attorney's office, I had the opportunity to go to a private firm to do insurance defense. And so, I mean, the biggest difference is that, obviously, when you're doing criminal, you're talking about people's liberties and crimes that were committed, and when you're doing civil, it's about money. And so I was, defending insurance companies against lawsuits, and I did that for, I think, almost 2 years. And it wasn't for me. I know people love it. I have lots of friends who do both plaintiffs work and insurance defense, and they love it. But it's a lot of billable hours, so you're putting down every 3 minutes what you're doing, and it was just a little too tedious for me. But because of the experiences that I had at the state's attorney's office, a lot of times with civil, you don't get in the courtroom that often, and so I was marketable in that way because I had been in front of, I don't even know how many juries by that time, and hundreds of bench trials. And so it was a marketable skill that I had that, had I done a different path, I wouldn't have had. And, I think it was important for me to do it as part of my career because I think I would have always wondered, would I have loved it or would I have been good at it? And so I think it was an important kind of stop that I took along the way.
Cool. So many of us only know about the legal profession through TV shows and movies and things like that. My dad was a lawyer, so I heard a lot about his work, and he did civil stuff. What is accurate in those shows, and what is left out that's either like the tedious stuff or the not exciting stuff, or what is really exciting about it that doesn't get captured in those shows?
Yeah, I feel like doctors I always talk to hate medical shows because they just don't do things accurately. And I love Law and Order and Law and Order SVU, but there's never you don't really have aha moments. They're kind of trials are very slow. I think they make them seem like they're really fast paced and somebody is gonna confess to a murder on the witness stand, but that doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. And I think, there are a lot of objections. It's very procedural. And I think when you first watch it, you're like, wait, why are you stopping all the time? Why, you're approaching the bench every 2 minutes to have a conversation between, the prosecutor, the defense attorney, and the judge that nobody else can hear. And so it's funny in that way that it's very different because it makes it seem like everything happens in the open, and that's not true because we have to, we're all bound by rules of evidence. And so the judge has to make rulings about whether or not certain statements or evidence is admissible or can come in. And so that's something that's very different. I also think, one thing that kind of it's we're very, at least in Prince George's County, we're very collegial. We all really like each other for the most part in terms of the state and the defense, and we work really well together, even when we have to be adversaries, which we do, and we all do our jobs and everyone does it very well. And we're adversarial when we have to be, but I think as colleagues like each other. And I understand that defense attorneys, public defenders, private counsel have a job to do, and it's a job that's a very important part of our criminal justice system. And I think that they know that I have a job to do and that I play a very important role. And so I think that, when you see it on TV, they hate each other and, one person is evil. And it's not really, that's not what the truth is. The truth is that people on both sides are good people who are doing their job for the most part. There are always bad seeds everywhere, but for the most part, there are good people who are doing their job and trying to, either when they're prosecutors, trying to keep the community safe, and when they're defense attorneys, trying to make sure that their clients' rights are being protected.
So in the legal field, it seems like there's such a wide range of types of roles. So if thinking about lawyers on the public side, you might be an elected, like state's attorneys are elected, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and then there might be appointees that come along with an elected official. In other cases, like on the federal side, the attorney general is appointed and then confirmed. The U.S. attorneys are then, I believe, appointed under that.
Yeah.
So what's kind of the range of how all that happens, and how would you explain to someone who is new to the legal profession?
Yeah, so typically state prosecutors are elected. So like the district attorney or the state's attorney in every jurisdiction. So every county in Maryland, and then the Baltimore City. Baltimore City, although it's not its own county, has its own elected state's attorney. So every county has its own elected state's attorney who prosecutes the local crime, which is what we just talked about, DUIs, all of that. For the jurisdiction on behalf of the state of Maryland. And then there is an elected attorney general for each state. Our attorney general right now is Brian Frosh, and he prosecutes the state crimes and he also has some jurisdiction to prosecute local crimes, but for the most part, he prosecutes, state crimes. So Medicaid fraud would typically be prosecuted by his office. He also prosecutes some, elected officials. There's also a state prosecutor who is appointed by the governor, who prosecutes some corruption, some white collar corruption cases. And then on the federal side, everybody is appointed by the president. So the president has the authority to appoint the attorney general for the United States, and then all of the U.S. attorneys that practice. Maryland has one U.S. attorney. And there are two jurisdictions, and he prosecutes all federal crime in Maryland on behalf of the President of the United States. And so typically, although it has up until this administration, Maryland had the same U.S. attorney through, I think, almost 3 administrations.
Wow.
But they serve at the pleasure of the president. So.
And then in that, like, U.S. Attorney's Office for Maryland, are the other attorneys that work for the U.S. Attorney, are they like civil service attorneys, or how many? Is it like upper management is appointed by the U.S. Attorney? How does that all work?
So the U.S. Attorney usually will have like a deputy, but they're typically civil servants that work within the office. The only appointed people are, in the same way in the State's Attorney's Office. Every administration I've been through now, this Ms. Braveboy's administration is my 3rd administration that I've been through in the office. They'll bring in their own, chief of staff or their own deputies to kind of run the office, but they're typically they're not elected, and they're typically career prosecutors, just ones that are aligned with whatever goals that administration has in terms of reducing crime or changes in the law that they want to make. And so the same is true at the U.S. Attorney's Office level, and the same is true for the Department of Justice. So I think the Attorney General is appointed, as is the Deputy Attorney General, but everybody else that kind of works, they may be chosen by the Attorney General, but they're typically, career prosecutors or career civil servants.
Cool. I know around in this area, there are a lot of people who have law degrees who aren't necessarily practicing attorneys, but they use those skills in other ways. So like in the U.S. Copyright Office or Patent and Trade and those types of places. Can you speak a bit about the kind of the legal education and how that can be applied in those kind of other settings where you're not necessarily in the courtroom all the time, but the legal knowledge is essential?
Yeah, I think what you really taught in law school, you're not taught how to be a lawyer even necessarily. What you're taught is how to critically think. And so, you read cases and you think about issues in a different way. And so that can be applied in any kind of field. I have a lot of friends who went to law school thinking they were going to become lawyers and then ended up doing policy work or working on Capitol Hill or, even, doing working for a company and doing something that has nothing to do with the law at all. But the skills that you learn in law school are really about, we do a lot of reading and then just learning how to critically think and solve logical problems in a way that conforms with the law.
Cool. Awesome. Well, as we're nearing the end of our program, I just want to make sure everyone knows that they should ask a question if you're watching and having fun.
Please.
I'm enjoying chatting with Melissa. I could probably do it for hours, but I want to make sure everyone thinks or everyone knows that this is for you too to ask questions. So while we're waiting on your audience questions, we'll ask some more fun questions. What kinds of books do you like to read if you're into reading, or do you watch TV shows, or
Yeah.
what do you do in your downtime?
Yeah, I do love to read. I'm reading right now. I'm in the middle of, was it Prisoner of Heaven, which is a book. It's a Spanish author whose name I can't remember off the top of my head, but all of his books have been translated into English, and they're fascinating. They're kind of in the post World War II era set, and they're about a young boy whose father owns a bookstore, and I really like it.
Cool.
So I really like to read fiction. I also, I'm kind of, you would think that I wouldn't do this on my downtime, but like I love, like real crime shows. So like the first 48, which is about homicides and like the detectives. I love that show. And that's kind of, that's what I like. I don't know why I should not watch it, but
That's all good.
all that stuff.
Cool. What have libraries done for you in like your schooling or in your career? Like, how have you relied upon libraries or not?
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, we didn't really have access to the internet. So I would go to the libraries, and I remember when I have research projects, and I would just spend my whole day at the library. I would bring like a lunch and like go eat it outside when I, wanted to. My mom would drop me off in the morning and then pick me up, and I would just kind of wander as I kind of decided what I wanted to write about, or and I loved the library. It was just like a really interesting place to kind of find, like, you look at microfilm and you read books, and then I get to go home to my computer, which we didn't have Google back then, and write these papers that are books that I checked out or copies that I made, and I think it's been it was like I loved that experience. And even when I went to law school, we learned, even though now we have Westlaw and all of those things, and you can look things up at the click of a button, we learned how to look up cases and case law in the library. And now that I have kids, it's, we go to story time at the library. We've been doing, sometimes the story time that they have at the local library here where I live, virtually. It's been, my kids love to go to the library and, pick out a new book that they get to read. Both of them have been a part of Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, so they get a book every month, which
Yes.
I love.
I'm gonna hire you to come work for us.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I tell everybody who has kids, like, you need to sign up for Dolly Parton's Imagination. My oldest just turned 5, so she got her last book.
Oh no!
Going to kindergarten, and she was so sad. But then she was like, "Can I write Miss Dolly a note and say thank you for all the books?" And it just, it gives them like a passion for books, which I've always had. I love to read, which is probably why I became a lawyer, because we read a lot. But I think having a passion for reading has kind of helped me along my career. And like I said, I fondly remember the times where I had to spend days of, my Saturday writing a research paper at the library.
Cool. And the thing that I love about libraries, I have many things that I love about libraries, but you really highlighted it in your experience, that the library is really here for everyone at every stage or point in their journeys. And so you're now kind of in like your third phase of your relationship with the library. You started off as a young person who was using it, and then you had your higher education use of the library, and then you have your whole professional career. But now you have your own family, and you're kind of interacting with us as a parent. And we spent a lot of time thinking about how we can make sure that we're here with the resources that everyone would like at the different stages of their lives. So I think we're pretty special thing as libraries generally, and this week happens to be National Library Week, which is fun.
Oh,
So it's
yeah.
well timed.
Yeah.
Oh, we do have a question. Let me pull
Oh,
that
good.
up. Oh, cool. Hi, Zach. I think this is my friend
Hi,
Zach from
Zach.
work, who is over a lot of our career programming, and I'm going to be really excited to get him on doing these interviews shortly. We're getting a bunch of our colleagues ready to do virtual programs. But here's a question: do you remember the first case that you prosecuted, and did the feelings after that experience confirm for you that you chose the right career?
I don't remember like exactly the facts of the first one, but I do remember the first case. I remember being in court for the first time, and having a trial. And and yes, it did. It confirmed. I mean, being a prosecutor, you have the highest highs because when you get justice for a victim, there's nothing that really can beat that. And then you have some of the lowest lows when you aren't able to bring justice to a victim, because you kind of take it on. I don't say you take it personally from the jury, but you take that victim's pain on personally, I think. And so, yes, absolutely. The first time I tried a case, 100%, like the adrenaline rush, which I still get, 12, 15 years later, confirmed that I was doing the right thing and doing what I think I should be doing.
Cool. Thank you for that. How do you kind of process if when a case doesn't go the way that you would like it to go for your result? And
I
not
mean,
not that it's a win or lose situation, but
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to learn from the experience. Every whether I get a conviction or whether I don't, whenever I have a jury trial, I go and I talk to the judge afterwards and say, what did I do well? What didn't I do well? Why do you think the jury either believed my victim or didn't believe my victim? And I try to learn from that experience. I try to talk to the juries if they want to talk to me. They obviously don't have to. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It's an experience for them, and I can imagine, depending on the type of crime, it can be obviously emotionally taxing. And I've been lucky to have some high profile cases throughout my career, and so brings another level of anxiety for jurors. But I just try to learn from it. I take the time to kind of grieve with the victim and grieve myself, because I mean we put in, not only myself, all the prosecutors in the office, we put in a lot of work on our cases. And so when the jury doesn't see it the same the way that we do, it is hard. But I think we have the best justice system in the world. And so, I honor the verdicts that the jury has. And I just try to do a better job next time.
Cool. And mentioning juries makes me think about the fact that we are all part of the legal system, even though
Yeah.
we don't necessarily realize that. But with the civic duty of serving on juries, that's something that's really essential to the whole system. Can you talk about that a bit, and how important jury service is?
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't do the criminal justice system wouldn't work without juries. You guys are necessary. The public is necessary to kind of make decisions on really important cases, whether it's criminal or civil, because we have both kinds of juries. I've tried both kinds of cases, and it just would come to, our system would come to a crashing halt without jurors. And so I know people don't really love jury duty, and I'm the only one who enjoys getting my jury notice. No one will ever put me on a jury, but um, it's so important, and to have a diverse background, to have people with different experiences sit and listen to the evidence impartially and make a decision based solely on what they hear inside that courtroom. Listening to the judge's instructions and come to a consensus. And it's kind of, sometimes, I mean, between 3 or 4 people, you can't even pick where you want to eat. And so trying to think about 12 people in a criminal trial and 6 people in a civil trial, trying to come up with a consensus, because for criminal cases, it has to be unanimous, meaning everybody has to agree that a person is either guilty or not guilty, is just kind of an incredible thing that we can do that in a, peaceful way, that people who didn't know each other from before and have to deal with really heavy topics can kind of sit in a room and talk and come up with a decision without yelling or screaming. Sometimes there's a little bit of yelling and screaming, but with being polite and it's just, I think it's an amazing thing.
Very cool. So I'm going to do one last call on audience questions. And while we're waiting for those to come in, I'm going to just share real quick with everyone some of the great career resources that we have through the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. First off, everyone in the community has the right to a free library card. And right now we're offering online sign up for virtual library cards. If you are a PGCPS student, your link card number serves as your library card number, so you don't need a separate library card, which is really awesome. So we have a bunch of really great resources for folks. I'm going to share the link right now in the chat box. We have, I'll just run through them quickly. We have lynda.com, which offers free courses and certifications and everything ranging from graphic design to web development, and that is totally free. We also have BrainFuse Job Now, which has tools for exploring your career interests, searching for jobs, helps you create a resume. You can get feedback from career development experts, and you can also get live coaching. We have a specialized BrainFuse platform called Vet Now, which is specifically geared towards veterans and helping them navigate benefits through the Departments of Veterans Affairs, prepare for college, and brush up on job skills, really focused on the community of folks who are transitioning out of military service. We have Career Transitions, which provides step-by-step guidance to discover your interests, choose a career path, prepare a resume, find out more about job openings and schools and programs. And then we also have Learning Express Library, which provides practice tests for college entrance, employment, and citizenship, as well as basic tutorials in math, reading, and writing. So there is a wealth of opportunity through the library for you to explore your career interests without having to commit to a career or a tuition bill. So please make use of those. And since we haven't received any other questions, I would just like to invite you, Melissa, to share how folks can connect with the state's attorney's office.
Sure. Yeah. So we are on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and I believe it's SAO News. The state's attorney, Aisha Braveboy, also is on Facebook, and she's always posting about cases that are coming to the office and issues. We also have coming up on the 30th, we have a sexual assault awareness event. We're doing it obviously remotely because this month is Child Abuse and Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And so we are having a panel. We're also having safety tips that are going to go out. We're going to have some survivors of sexual assault talk about their experiences going through the legal system. And then, I'm going to talk a little bit about sexual assault, the laws here in Maryland, changes that have come up in the laws, as well as, talk about the statistics behind sexual assault. So if you want to participate in that, if you go to our website, the state attorney also has a website through the county. All of it is on there, but you can always find us on social media under the SAO News. So
great. Well, this has been delightful. I really appreciate your
thank
time
you.
and your willingness to do this. I think this has been a really great opportunity for folks to hear about your experience and different ways that they might choose to explore a career in law. And we look forward to seeing you in other events that you do through your team. And we appreciate your service to the community and look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.
Thank you so much. Everyone stay safe.
Okie doke. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.